Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a moment. Thank you all for coming and welcome to the Gray Decision Intelligence Demand Trend webinar designed specifically for community college professionals. There are a few housekeeping items to get started with. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's the Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during the session and we'll follow up later with you if we run out of time. My Gray colleagues and I will be available for chat for the duration of this session. You will, in fact, receive a link to the webinar recording and the presentation slides in the next few days. Please look for it in your email. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Zach Paz, our main presenter for this session.
Thank you, Marianne. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have an update for you this month about the latest in demand trends for higher education programs. Again, we'll be focusing on certificate and associate's programs. For the agenda today, we actually have a special kind of presentation around program management, and I'll give you a little peek into what this is, and then we'll go into some details with even a demo. But the idea here is if you have access to data and you have your colleagues have access to data, the question is, how do you put a process together to ask the right questions, collect the evidence, and then have it in one place so that others can review it? And so that's really what we want to give an example of how to implement this in type of using a tool to help implement it into a workflow. So that's our special thing we'll be talking about this month. So as we always do, we always start with a quick reminder about Gray Decision Intelligence. We are solely focused in higher ed. We help higher education leaders such as yourselves make data-informed decisions around your academic programs. We believe in a holistic view around academic programs, not just looking at external market data, which we will be today, but the importance of looking at your data internally and having that available to really get the full context around what you should be doing with your current programs, where there's growth opportunities, what programs are doing just fine, and what programs may be at the end of their life cycle. And you actually have the evidence to say, you know what, we should really invest these resources somewhere else, all while keeping your mission front and center. So that's the basics and framework that we call our program evaluation system. And as always, we'll be focusing today on external markets. What's going on outside your four walls of your institution? What are student demand trends? What are employer trends? And how can you use that information to inform decisions around your academic programs? So starting with student demand, we saw this trend of increasing Google searches for academic programs. First, when we say academic programs, we're talking about categorizing them by zip code, classification instructional program. We're tracking keywords for 900 programs, and those 900 programs cover 90% of all U.S. completions. So a lot of coverage here. And for each program, we're tracking an average of 15 keywords. So imagine we're tracking certificate in cosmetology degree or associates in business administration as a couple of examples of those keywords we're tracking. Now, what we saw in March is a huge increase, and that is continuing the trend over the last 12 months, really, of this year-over-year increase in program-specific keywords. So what we're seeing here is a 45% increase, which is very large. And we saw some of those large peaks even last year in September and October. And we're continuing to see that trend here. One thing that this might be leading to is people are either getting interest in, okay, higher ed, what can I do to either make sure that I'm going to be sufficiently employed, what additional education. And last time we saw some very large enrollment increases and Google searches was obviously when the economy is in somewhat of a potential turmoil or not. Often people will go back to education. So we might be seeing an early indicator here of that. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months. But overall, the good news is program searches are up. We also track how much does it cost to advertise for these keywords. And we use a way to look at this using the Google AdWords cost per click. And in this month, in March, we saw a 3% year-over-year increase. So actually this is the first month this year where the cost increased. In January and February, the cost was slightly down. And what we're tracking here, and we see about an average about $14 per click, we're tracking what does it cost for you to bid to the top result of for the result of that keyword. So one thing to keep in mind, you might not actually be bidding on those at that top level, but that gives us, this is a way for us to kind of compare apples to apples across all the keywords we're doing as well. So just keep that in mind. The other thing is, one of the nice use cases for this is identifying these keywords that we're tracking, which ones have high volume, and potentially not going after the highest cost ones. Maybe there's some in the middle that still have good volume, but maybe a lower cost. So there's some very tactical things that you can do here, working either if you're in the marketing department or working with your marketing team to identify those. Another big use case for this is identifying those keywords and making sure that they're in your program pages to help with your SEO, search engine optimization. So very cool tactical things you can do with this Google search data, in addition to understanding where the trends are. So if we look at this from a program perspective, we're seeing looking at some of the fastest growing in March, year over year. And you can see some of the lists here. Top one was computer programming, grew 600% in terms of searches nationally. So that's a huge number, and something that should be considered and taken into account. We also categorize these just to give you an idea of how these programs compare to different areas. And we have a number, the top 10, 5 of them were health related, 2 of them were education related, and then we just have 3 as other. But as you can see, computer programming, education, and fashion are at the top 3 in terms of search growth. A colleague mentioned that March is like fashion month, which could also be a reason why we saw an uptick in the fashion apparel design searches as well. So that's an update from our Google search trends. And again, this is only the top 5 or top 10, and we have in our data set where you can access, if you can access that, you have over 900 searches where you can see programs where you can see the search trends for those programs. So let's look at another area of student demand, which is enrollment. And this is on the left side, we're looking at US total enrollment for undergraduate certificate programs. And what we've seen since 2020 is a gradual increase, 3 to 5% year over year increase. Now, one of my favorite things to do with this information is say, did we grow 5% year over year? Did we grow more? Did we grow less? And it's a great way, again, to understand how can we compare what's happening internally with our own enrollment to what's going on externally. Great question I always like to ask, is it me or the market? Whether that's a positive or a negative from growing or declining. So that's been a continual increase for certificate. We'll then look at associate's degrees. There was a decline all the way down to 2022, but as of 2023 and 2024, that has also started to come back. Still not at the 2018 levels or even 2019 levels, but we are starting to see increases in enrollment. And again, the question is, how does that compare to my enrollment? Did we grow overall 3% in our enrollment in associate's degrees, for example? Here is now look at, we're going to start with certificate programs and first look at the year-over-year growth at the individual program level. And the top program grew 33%, and that was auto body collision repair tech. And so this is a way to really understand what's trending in the market from an enrollment standpoint. In addition to auto body, we have health services, allied health, electrician, HVAC, and you can see that of the top 10, half of them were trades programs. So still increase in demand for trades programs. 4 of them were health. And then we also had cybersecurity and information assurance, which again, this has been one of the largest increases across all award levels. So if we can continue to see this program in the top 10, it would be pretty impressive since it has been growing so much year over year. All right. So from an associate's degree level perspective, the top one also grew 33%, and that was radiological tech. And then if we do look at the breakdown here, 4 of the top 10 were health, 3 were trades, and 3 were other. But also one thing to keep in mind is not just either degrees where they're going to go directly into the workforce, but which programs are growing that could potentially be transfer programs. Now, cybersecurity, I think, could fit in both of those. I think there's a lot of opportunity at the associate's level in terms of employment for cybersecurity, but also bachelor's level cybersecurity is huge as well. So they could help them transfer, those students help transfer and hit the ground running in a bachelor's program in cybersecurity or beyond. And then some of the others, education and economics as well. But just gives you an idea of where is an interest happening from an enrollment perspective at the associates level. All right, so we looked at Google search, very early indicator of what might be happening. Hopefully we see those searches turn into enrollment, and we'll start to see that as the more recent enrollment numbers come out. We then obviously looked at enrollment. The third that we always like to keep an eye on is Coursera data. And so we scrape Coursera to understand what enrollment is going on, what's happening from an enrollment perspective. And since March 2025, there's been over 140, almost 145 million learners since inception. So that's 2012. So it's one thing to keep in mind. This is a very large data set, and it helps give you a view into what students are interested in learning from more of a topic level. Obviously, there are some degrees that are offered through Coursera, but what I see the most value in it is understanding what are the kind of curriculum level ideas or topics that are in demand. And do you have those courses embedded in your programming so that students will be interested in, because there's evidence of students just going to either do free courses or low-cost non-degree type of education. The top courses that we see are heavily technology and data focused. So top 10 are all of them, 7 of them are technology, 3 of them are other. So you can see data everywhere, AI for everyone. It's a big one. Technical support, fundamentals, foundations of UX design. So lots of tech. So that is also one thing to keep in mind when people are going to these non-degree type of educational areas. That's very heavy tech focus, which also could influence some bias. So take that with a grain of salt. There might not be a lot of other people looking for biology courses from a non-degree perspective, for example. But again, helps you identify what are those non-degree areas of interest, and should that influence what type of courses and topics I have within my own programming. From this data, we can also see for each of the courses what type of skills are being taught. And probably no surprise from what we saw on the previous page, but all of the skills, a lot of them have to do with data and technology. So data analysis is the number one skill being taught. In increases from March 2024 to March 2025, data visualizations, spreadsheets, data science, data cleansing. I think all of them have to do with data, except for the bottom one here, which is project management, which when we start looking at the employment data, you'll see project management is one of the top skills requested by employers as well. So not only is it interest from the student perspective, but it's also, as we'll see, always a top area of interest from an employer perspective. Let's see, I see some comments. Just want to check if there are any questions so far. Okay, nothing. If you do have any questions, please feel free to write them into the chat there. All right, now switching gears to employment. We have first starting with just an idea, just a reminder around this concept of how do programs link to the job market. And when I'm looking at data for programs around employment, what data should I be looking at? So here's an example of looking at art and art studies and what the NCS crosswalk what the NCS crosswalk actually links to this program. And what we find is that there's 8 occupations that are mapped to this program. And what we're showing here are the job postings that we have in March 2025 related to those occupations. So the number one for art and art studies based on the NCS crosswalk is secondary school teachers. And what we understand about that is not only is that potentially an occupation that actually needs additional training, but that's really the largest one. Following that, it's really not that many job postings. Photographers, art, drama, fine artists, special effects artists, animators, craft artists. So again, this is giving you a volume of the jobs that are, quote unquote, these graduates are being directly prepared for. Now, when you actually look at evidence of what happens in reality, and we actually have data on almost 19,000 graduates with an associate's in art studies. We actually showed that they go into 740 occupations. Now, if anyone's familiar with how many occupations the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually keeps track of, it's over 800. So basically what this is telling us is that, yes, you are graduating from an art studies. There are things that seem like they're directly related, as we saw on the previous page, but that doesn't mean many of those students are actually going to go into those occupations. So understanding that and making sure that students might even understand that, and that you have proper programming to help those students make sure that, even if they're not going to go into those fields that maybe they want to go into, that they're prepared to go into other fields. So these are the top 10 occupations for which associates in art studies graduates often go into. And then we're showing you the count of that. And of the top 10, only 2 of them are arts related. Some of the top ones here, and I mentioned this in the previous one, project management specialist. So yeah, maybe we will have an associate's in art studies, but make sure there's programming available for those students to gain some of these additional skills. So if they can't get into what they want to do maybe right away, they can make their way there, through other pathways, and maybe starting out with having project management skills, having customer service skills, having maybe some sales skills, and other things like that, so that they can be more prepared to enter the workforce and make their way to the areas that they want to, occupations they want to enter. So what's been happening over the last month in terms of job postings? We actually saw an increase in the number of job postings. That was 11% year over year in March. We saw a small increase in January, probably around 5%, actually flat to down in February, and then a large increase in March. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues, especially into April and May. But so far, we're actually seeing an increase in job postings. Some of the job postings that are being posted the most, so this is volume at the associates and certificate level, are registered nurses, retail salesperson, general and operations managers, nursing assistants. So of the top 10, 4 of them are health related, which is always interesting to keep in mind. And then we see some of the other ones here. So again, the question here is, can you take this information to help inform what programming is available to your associates and undergraduate certificate students who may want to enter the workforce right after graduation? What skills what jobs are out there, especially in your local markets? We're looking at national data, but this might differ very much for your local market. And can you provide that information to the students, as well as make sure that programming is available to say, we have these employers in our market, these are the skills they're looking for. So even if you're studying different areas, you might want to take some of these courses in project management, or you might want to take a course in computer and IT support, or take a course in something else that again can give them those skills so that they can go into the workforce and hopefully be more employable in that case. So this is the volume. We also have the fastest growing jobs. And so this is look nationally, some of the top in terms of payroll and timekeeping clerks, for some reason, grew 300% in March. We have and I think we have a minimum of 3,000 jobs nationally. So we're not looking at too small of numbers, although 3,000 nationally might still be a little small. 200% for heating, AC, and refrigeration mechanics. This one's a big one here, software developers. We can now see that software developers showed up kind of in 2 areas, from the Google searches from students, but also the job postings for employers. From computer programming to software developers can obviously be aligned very well. So now you're seeing both sides of the coin really focusing on an area. Some of the other areas we're seeing still some health programs, even licensed practical nurse rounding at the bottom there with 27% increase there. So when we look at all those jobs, compare them in March, and we say, okay, what are the fastest growing skills? We see automation is the top one, 86% growth in terms of how many times, what percentage increase of this is being mentioned in job postings. So if I were to look at this, one thing I would want to consider is, should we have a class about automation? And maybe we need to go to our industry partners and say, hey, we're seeing this skill listed a lot. What can we do to make sure that our graduates are getting the type of skills around automation that you need? There's obviously many different types of automation, and it could be specific to the employers in your market, not just general for national. So that's one of the first things I would ask is who's posting automation, what jobs are those, and can I go talk to those industry potential partners and make that linkage back to our programming, and also create that potential bridge from the graduates who have those skills to that employer in the market. So really how can you use this data tactically? And that's probably one of the biggest areas that I see from working with institutions. Patient safety, obviously that mostly related to nursing, most likely radiology, as we saw, radiological tech showed up very high. Risk management is interesting. Could be related to kind of just operations management. Um, and here's computer science, as we saw, and some other health related, and even HVAC showing up there. As we saw, HVAC was one of the top growing jobs. So not surprising to see it as one of the top, fastest growing skills as well. Any questions on any of the latest demand trends? Okay, so we are going to switch gears. I want to introduce our friend at Nuventive, John. Let me stop sharing my screen. And again, we're going to show you a way that you can put a workflow together to help you, yourself, your colleagues, and create the right questions that you want to be able to answer. And again, create these workflows to help work through this information. As you can see, there's a lot of information. So, John, welcome.
Thanks, Zach. You want me to just dive right in?
Yeah, if you want to just introduce yourself and give a quick intro about a Nuventive and then jump in would be great.
I can do that. So hi, everybody. I'm John Volodakis. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Nuventive. And Nuventive is the data-informed improvement company. We serve higher education customers. We've been in business for about 25 years. We've worked with hundreds of institutions on bringing together complex distributed processes informed by relevant data and trying to achieve consistent results across the organization by trying to systematize the analysis and use of data in various processes. And so we've worked with our friends at Gray to pull together what we're calling the Gray Program Evaluation System, which is powered by Nuventive. And hopefully everybody can see my screen here. But I'm going to walk through a quick example of what this looks like. So this leverages a concept that Nuventive calls guided analytics. And what that means is it basically means taking robust information like the great dashboards that Gray provides, right? And then saying, what am I supposed to do with that? So if I'm a program chair and all the analysis that Zach just walked through, what should I be doing with all this information that's in there? Well, maybe I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing with it. So the team at Gray has put together some suggested analysis that people can go through to be able to say, how do I evaluate whether my program is doing well? So as I come in here, I'm in a sample program. I don't know if folks can read this, but I'm in the computer science program. And this is kind of the home page. It gives you some guidance on where to go. When I click on this main menu, right, it tells me what can I do as here, the chair of the computer science program. I have three things here that I can do. I can do my program evaluation semester review or annual review. And those are two different sets of analysis that the grade team has come up with. The semester review is a little less comprehensive. The annual review adds a few sections and some more information, right? But the idea is that I can come in here and I can look at some information from the gray dashboards, and then over here on the left, provide my analysis of that. These cards represent analysis that's already been done. So you can see here, we can track what did we do in 23-24, what did we say in 24-25. I'll open this 24-25 example. So I just double click on that card and it pulls up a form, right? We have a few sections in here. Before I launch into that, let me go over here on the right. This is what Nuventive calls our information panel. And this pulls information in context that's relevant to what I'm supposed to be doing over here on the left. So in this case, Gray is identified when we come in here and ask a program to do this semester review. There's four Gray dashboards we want to look at. There's an enrollment dashboard, an integrated program dashboard, a market share dashboard, and a market scorecard dashboard. And so these are out of all the dashboards Gray provides, right? These are the four we want you focused on right now. So we're pulling that information down in context. But as I start to go in here, let me open this first section of view enrollment trends. And this has already been filled out, so the information's in here. But what will happen is, as I click in this first section, watch the right-hand panel, this is now going to go down in context to say, when I answer this question, I'm expected to use this dashboard, right? So I'm really narrowing down for that program chair. I don't have 4 dashboards that I have to navigate through. Now I know I'm supposed to use this one. If I click on it, hopefully this didn't time me out while Zach was talking, and it didn't, so it looks like it's loading. So as this comes up, this is now going to default to a split screen view. And this is the gray enrollment dashboard that program is going to use. You'll notice this is automatically filtered down. So it's showing me this is the Bachelor in Computer Science. And we've arbitrarily, for our demo, selected the state of Florida as our geography, right? So as we come in here and we look at this, I'm getting this report in context as the program chair. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be looking at to answer my questions. And now I can come over here and do that, right? So I have this split screen view. I can be manipulating this data. So if I want to come in here and, for example, just look at new student enrollment, right? This is a live dashboard. I can come in here and I can use this just as if I was using it through my gray launcher. But if I navigate down to what I want, I can then come over here and answer my question. And as I move through this form, what will happen here is that let me go down to a different section. So I'll come down here to student demand. As I click in here, now instead of the enrollment dashboard, I'm now looking at the market scorecard dashboard. And again, I can use that dashboard to answer my questions. While that's loading, you'll see here I have the ability to embed snapshots of the evidence that I use to answer my questions. And that's important because as others need to review this, whether it's the next department chair a few years later coming back to see what did I say, whether this is the dean of the college who wants to go back and look at it. If I've come in here and I've manipulated this report, this now gives whoever's looking at it the ability to see the data the same way I viewed it when I made my decision. So by embedding that in here, we've kind of institutionalized that view and said, now anybody who reads this analysis is going to be able to see how things looked at the time that I made these decisions, right? So once I'm done filling out my form, right, I can hit save and that'll save back into the database. What I can also do here is, let's say that I'm going through this form and as I'm filling it out, I think about, hey, there's an action we should be taking. Right, I'm seeing something in my analysis. There's something I should do. I can come up here to this menu, and down at the bottom, we have this quick link where I can say add action, and that'll pop up a form where I can quickly add an action into the system. This is optional. You don't have to do it, but if you want to, right, you can start to add and track actions in here. We can align these actions to the metrics that we were looking at as we're doing our analysis so that we can start to track what actions am I taking to influence student demand or market share or employment or the various categories of things that I'm looking at in here. And once I've done that, I'll close out of this form real quick. Actually, before I close out of the form, once we've finished this, the other thing that then we can do is we're pulling together, and this is using a report now out of the Nuventive system. This is now going to pull up, what did I say, right? And this might do it for 2 years here, because I didn't specify for 1 year. But this is now going to give me a Word document with my analysis, right? So here's all the questions I just answered. Right, as I flip through here, here's those snapshots of the data that I looked at, right? Here's all my answers, here's my conclusions. So I have that in here. And then if I have an action plan, let me finish flipping through the form. If I have an action plan, it'll also attach that here, right? So I can see all my actions and the updates as part of this form, right? And so now this is available as we move up in the organization. So let me get out of the split screen view and back to here. Before I move up to the college level, right, I mentioned we can have that action plan in here. So again, if you decide to do this, each of these cards represents an action. If I click on that action, I can see the questions that we've asked folks to fill out, the alignment to that metric, what were you trying to achieve, etc. I can also assign this action to anybody in my program. So if I say, hey, Zach, you're responsible for this, you'll get an email on whatever frequency we specify that asks you to put an update into the system. And you would just click a link in that email. You would fill out the quick little form that pops up, which would basically duplicate this. You can see here we have the history of your updates, right? So as I open up the most recent one, you can see here, this is the form I would get if I was doing it through an assignment. I can still access any of my dashboards here if I wanted to look at these while I'm filling this out. But what I can also do here is I can start to share lessons learned, right? So one of the things that we can do is try and accelerate learning across the organization by saying, when I was working on this problem, what did I learn? Do I want to share this with my colleagues? If I do, we can pull that out and see it so that you can start to get that view across the organization of what's working to solve particular problems. So once I'm done working here at my program level, right, and as I mentioned, the annual review is an extension of the semester review. It works pretty much the same way. I'm not going to bother to show it. When I move up here to a college, let me go to College of Arts and Sciences, for example. So now what we have is the ability for the dean, let's say, to come in and see what have all my programs done. And just so it doesn't take forever to run, I'm just going to pick 2 programs here. So let me pick which ones have data in them. I know computer science does. And let's do one more here. Let's say accounting, right? And I'm going to pick those and I'm going to run this report. This will give me that same Word report that I had before, but now for all of the programs I want to look at. And what I can do now as the chair is we've asked the chair to come in and basically, or I'm sorry, as the dean, so here's my report. I can look at each of my programs and see what they've said, right? So here's accounting, computer science, right? Same report we looked at before. But now if I'm the dean, I can be going through this and saying, do I agree with this? What changes do I propose? How do I characterize the overall health of my college within the university? Right. So this gives me the ability to quickly answer these questions, which can then roll up higher in the organization. So if we're in the provost's office, we could come in and we could look at, and again, because I'm logged in as an administrator, I can see all those units. Somebody who was just logging in would only see their unit. So now if I'm in the provost's office, I can look at a quick dashboard here that's going to show me what have each of my colleges said, right? So now I'm getting the roll up of all of my deans. And in our demo data set, we only have 2 deans in here, right? But I can see that, the College of Arts and Sciences just said everything was good, kind of a quick response. The College of Engineering, a little more detailed response. But I can kind of see what's happening here. So what we're basically getting is, as I'm working at a program level, I'm going through and I'm doing my detailed analysis using the dashboards that I'm being guided through. Based on that, I'm coming up with conclusions that roll up to my dean. The dean can look at those and say, I agree, I disagree, I can give you feedback. The provost has a view into the entire organization as to what's happening. They can get to that detail if they need it, but we tried to keep this as simple as possible to be able to say, I just want to see what's happening, at a macro level rather than reading every detail of every form. The other thing that we've done here is we've built in some views where, for example, the dean can come in and look across their organization, right? Who's done this? Right? Have you actually filled out your reviews? We pulled out some trend data. And we just did a couple of them for the demo purposes, right? But I'm able to see, am I trending up or down in market enrollment versus institutional enrollment, for example. So I can take a look at that. I mentioned that, if we wanted to have action plans, I can come in here and see at a glance, what are all of the actions that all of my programs are taking? Or maybe I just care about one of my programs. I want to see what accounting is doing, right? I can quickly filter that down and just see that data. Maybe I'm interested in seeing what accounting is doing specifically around employment, right? I can filter down to that. And it looks like all 3 of those still were in that range. But, it gives me that ability to quickly look across and see what everyone's doing. And as I mentioned, we can start to pull out these effective practices that people have raised as well, right? So I can come in here and see what people highlighted as effective practices that their peers might want to learn about. And again, I can filter that down by the metric they were trying to influence. So I can get at, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. How did my peers solve that problem? So with that,
And
Zach, anything I missed that
yeah,
you were expecting me to talk about? Otherwise, I'll stop. We can take
no,
questions.
yeah. Well, one question that always comes up is, those questions. How do you come up with those, and can we come up with our own questions?
Sure. So those questions, were worked on by the team at Gray to basically say this is how we intended our reports to be used, right? That we think would be useful. If a particular organization did say, "Yeah, I got a couple other questions I want to ask," sure, we could probably
Yeah,
do that.
awesome.
And we can definitely do that. It's just a question of, we don't want to necessarily make wholesale changes to it, but we can certainly add a few questions if that's,
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate
yeah.
the demo there. If anyone has any questions or would like to follow up about kind of what we're doing here, it's again really I like the term guided uh, analysis to really keep everyone at your organization on the same page of how you should be using this information, and how you can and streamline that process. So thank you
Mm,
very much. And let
yeah, no
me
problem.
switch back to my screen here.
I have to stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, for this month, in summary, we saw increases almost across the board, which is very strong, with including Google searches, enrollment, and job postings. Some of the largest and some of the fastest computer programming grew very fast. We have auto among one of the largest auto collision, much largest enrollment growth. Um, Understanding the difference between what students are quote unquote being directly prepared for and what they actually do can help inform your curriculum and programming, and then identifying what are those skills, who is posting those skills in their jobs, and identifying the employers could be a really helpful way to approach them as a potential, an industry partner, and say, how can we best align your needs with our programming so that our students can fulfill the needs that you have from an employment perspective. So that's summary for this month. As always, we do these monthly. So our next one will be Wednesday, May 28th, 2 p.m. And just a reminder, learn more about kind of academic program evaluation. We have a course on that where you can actually get a certificate in academic program evaluation. And then we also have our book, Start, Stop, Grow, written by our founder and CEO, around program evaluation and management. So I'd like to thank everyone for your time today and hope to see you on our next session.